So, suggestion is to remember our story and to tell a story. So we must end the continuation of the oppressor's story or someone else's story and continue with our and our ancestors' story. Because as we see, or we've seen, if we don't, they're going to be erased. And it's going to be only the oppression story. If you go into any halls of any institution in Latin America, in North America, wherever you go, you see those corridors full of Caucasian or colonizers' pictures. You see statues. You see their statues in the plazas, but we hardly see any pictures or statues, African descendants that did all these things and are not remembered, and they're not even there. They don't even occupy a space in those halls or institutions. And so by doing this, by continuing their story, by doing this, both we and our ancestors will continue to go on. It's unwise for me to ask something that I myself am not doing. So as I continue with my story, and allow me to share a bit about the story of my paternal grandmother's line. And the reason why I chose to share my paternal grandmother's line, it's because, like I said before, there's very little mention of females. And I believe and I think that it's time that we begin to always look for those females that also contributed to the history. I chose her and I chose her sister as well. So let's continue linking the stories that are liberating and just and transformative. So let's search, let's look in your family, begin with your family. Who in your family, what legacy did they leave for you and your descendants? If you don't want to start there, then look for some in your community, but look for them and learn about their stories. And I'm pretty sure that you're also going to one day be interested in your story as well, so that our stories can continue. And so my grandmother, and I'm really excited to be able to share this personal thing, this personal information with you. It means a lot. Her name was Lesbia del Villar Robles, and you can see her there on the left-hand side, and you can see me right under her. And so she was an educator, and she understood the power of education. She married my grandfather, who was Julian Nazario Suardi Enriquez. He was a prominent lawyer and a governor of La Vega and Bonao. Now, he's well known, so I said, I'm not going to talk about my grandmother, about my grandfather. A lot of people know him, but they hardly know my grandmother. And because of her, I know she did some great things, because she had a son, and her son was my father, Julian Nazario Suardi del Villar, who married my mother, Ligia Luisa Pavonesa Núñez, and he was very active in his community, both here in the Dominican Republic. He was very involved politically until he was exiled in 1961 when they killed Trujillo. So he went into exile to New York, and there he led El Frente de Dominicanos Unidos, United Dominican Front in New York City, a Dominican community organization in the diaspora. He led and promoted Dominican civil rights in New York City, and oppression and free government in the Dominican Republic. He died early. He died when he was 47. And he taught me this I guess this revolution spirit that I have of, change and to support freedom, the right to speak. That's him there on the with the red arrow. And so that's him in New York City with his fellow brothers that were also joining him. And so I'm very grateful that I have a story that can continue. And I have a story that I can tell as well. Because of him, a lot of things happened. And in that community in New York City, a lot came out of that. And so the other person that I'm going to speak about is her sister. And her sister was Belén del Villar Robles. And Belén del Villar Robles, she was her younger sibling. And she birthed Dr. Guarocuya Batista del Villar. He was the son of Francisco Batista and Belén del Villar. They were both also educated, and undoubtedly one of the most, and he was one of the most outstanding doctors in the Dominican Republic has produced to this day. He was our cardiologist, essayist, researcher, poet, author, and he was born also in Bonao. He graduated from the university as a doctor of medicine as magna cum laude from the University of Santo Domingo in 1956. He studied pediatric and adult cardiology in France. He won a scholarship. And he also won another scholarship for the United States. And so he also went to the United States to continue his studies. He was responsible for creating the first ideas for heart transplant in the country here in the Dominican Republic. He was the coordinator of the National Union of Human Rights. He chaired the support committees of El Salvador and Nicaragua when they were at war. And he also, back in those days in the 60s, we had a lot of commotion were going on in that time politically, because the United States invaded the Dominican Republic in 1965. He was part of the government, the Juan Bosch. Juan Bosch was a socialist, and so they were coming into this new government. They were elected by the people, and they were coming with all these liberal ideas, and people were afraid. And so especially those elite people on the top, they were like really afraid. And so they had to ask the United States to come and help them. And so sure enough, they came and they invaded us. And that's another story that you can also look it up. And so because otherwise it's going to be more, it's going to prolong. And so as you can see, the reason why I wanted to mention him is because my parents, they taught me that there's a lot of weapons that we can use in life, but we have to be smart enough or wise enough to understand and to know what weapons to use in life. And I think that both my father and his cousin, Guarocuya, which, by the way, Guarocuya is another name, a name of the cacique back in the Taino era. And so they both spoke about weapons of peace, of friendship. And we can see also with Guarocuya, he's a doctor. He was a doctor. He was one of the most prominent doctors till today in the Dominican Republic. And yet, it came a point where he even lost his house because he was more dedicated to the cause of resistance and liberation and democracy than his wealth. And so he didn't practice. He was, president of the university for many years, etc. But still, he chose to serve the people. He still chose to be an instrument to serve against oppression. Even he was a doctor, so he was still, that didn't mean that he could not give his efforts, just like my father, even though he was in exile and he didn't have that many possibilities. No matter what, they stood to continue the resistance of oppression wherever they were. It didn't matter. And with whoever they needed to share, in this case, El Salvador and Nicaragua, like Guarocuya did. Now, the other reason why I wanted to mention Guarocuya is because it's funny. You see how when these stories are lost, a government comes into power. And because we don't know the stories, we don't even know what, yeah, go ahead and say everything. But did you know that El Salvador president right now, Bukele, he's great. And he's doing, I see he's doing like great things in El Salvador. But did you know that he has a tax for any African that is coming from Africa to visit or to come to El Salvador? And they have to pay $1,200 to be able to come into El Salvador. Now, that to me is really sad, because what Bukele doesn't know, that my father's cousin, my uncle, he was and he stood for the freedom of El Salvador, and he was an African descendant. And so you see, if I didn't know these stories, I wouldn't know that this president in El Salvador, what he is doing with that, no matter what he's trying to achieve, it's wrong. And it's wrong because we don't remember. Our story is not told. And that's why, as long as I have a voice, I will continue to tell not only my story, but everyone's story that needs to be told. That again, it's going to bring us justice, liberation, and transformation. So I thank you, and thank you so much for your participation and your your presence here today. And Ben, if we have any questions or any comments or anything that anybody wants to add.
At the moment, I have anything. Lizette, do you have a question, concern? Anything you want to add?
Hi, yes, my name is Lizette from Delivering Services with Love. I am an African American descent. My aunt is the historian in the family, but she believes our family is from Madagascar. Um, how do you really, without doing the ancestry, because I do have feelings about ancestry, how do you find out your ethnicity, your nationality? Is there a way to just find out without doing ancestry?
Actually, no. I had to do a lot of digging, a lot of searching in order for me to be able to restore or recuperate or even know that I had an African descendant ancestry. Why? Because that's why I mentioned during the presentation, our minds are colonized. When I say our minds are colonized, is that we think as the colonizer. And so we were taught that they are the superiority and I'm not. So I'm trying to be like them. So if I want to be, recognized, I have to try to associate myself or to come as close as I can to them. Now, the other part of me is that I am mixed because my mother was Caucasian. And so I had this, should I say, this pulling on both sides. And wherever I went, they used to think that I was more white than Black. So that kind of like also put me in a position, okay, so what am I? I can't deny that I'm part Caucasian, and I can't deny that I'm part African, but I was never taught anything about Africa. I was never taught. As a matter of fact, Still today in the island here, you don't hear anybody. You ask them and they don't know. Oh, no, no, no. I'm Dominican. I'm not African. No, 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 no. You see? So yes, I think that we here, probably there, it's easier for you to be able to connect and to be able to identify yourself with that identity. But here and in Latin America, it's more difficult for us to be able to do that. And that's why I'm very adamant to the fact that this information has to come out, because we need to be able to honor our ancestors. Okay, I'm not saying that if you don't want to identify, okay, I mean, that's your choice, but at least recognize what they did. At least recognize them, because I'm not here sitting here just because. No, they did something. And so I have to honor that.
I believe that we have contributed a lot to history that has not even been exposed, or that is not even being told correctly. So I
Mhm.
think it is important for this information to come forth, and for people to hear it, and for people to know, so they can see how uh, not only African Americans, but Latin Americans, and how everybody that's a person of color, which I do not like that term of people of color, because I believe that we're all people of color. It's just a term used
Mhm.
to keep segregation going. But to be able to know how we have been contributed and recognized, and know that we are historians. We are historians. So I thank you for this
Mhm.
presentation. It was beautiful, very informative.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Lisette. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I actually got a question for Lizette. First, would you be able to tell us what DSL is, especially for the people that aren't listening? And the second question to that is, based off what you have, what Mali has presented today, how does that reflect the work that you're doing within the community?
I'm sorry, Ben. I didn't hear the first question. Can you repeat the first question?
So the first question was basically for Lizette to explain what DSL is, and how does the presentation reflect on the work that she's doing in the community.
Oh, good, good, good. Yes, Lisette, we want to hear that.
DSL, which is Delivering Services with Love, we are an organization who actually supports residents in the community. We're a nonprofit. We actually started back in 2005, and we started out actually feeding people who were less fortunate or vulnerable of becoming unsheltered, or they had behavioral health challenges, which left them on the street. And from 2005,
Mm,
and going out into the streets and supplying resources and clothing and items and nutritious meals for residents in the
mm,
streets in the community. We started engaging youth, providing programs for to help use anti-violence, and be able to support them with anger management, and also other supplies for school mentoring and things of that sort. And we also have a program called Guild Missionary, which is my mother-in-law started, where she actually engaged not only the youth, but also older adults, and help them when they're sick and shut in, and provide them with cards and flowers and things like that, just to let them know that they're not forgotten. And that's what we like to do. We like to engage those vulnerable populations, and help them, and support them, and let them know that they are not forgotten. They are an important part of the community, whether they're, like I said, older adults who we can learn from, or the youth who are actually going to be our future. So these members of the community are very important, and they need support. They really need support to know who they are, where they came from, and where they're going. So providing this information and letting them see how important their heritage is, and letting them know that they are somebody, and how useful they can be, and to actually change the narrative and the mindsets of their lives, could make a difference of our next president, of our next scientists, judges and lawyers and doctors. So that's why this information is
mm.
extremely important, to delivered to the community so they can actually find out who they are and help them to say, because the stigma is you're nothing, you're nobody, you're lazy, you're dumb. But that's not true. It's not true at all. So we have this program called I Don't Fit the Description, I Am Me, to let them know their
Mm.
individuality and let them know who they are and how they can actually change the narrative, not only for themselves, but future generations.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That's a great job, Lisette, that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for sharing also. And I hope that this information that we're sharing in our channel as well and in the podcast, I hope that it helps as well, because it's information that they need, unless you look and you know where to look and you know for who to look for. Otherwise, at least that's why I'm bringing this out so that it can just be there. And whoever doesn't know and doesn't know where to look or for who to look for, then it's here. And we have all this information, and that's why we're doing this as well. So Ben.
I think that's all that we have right now.
Beautiful
Okay.
presentation. Beautiful. It's amazing.
Thank you.
I would like to actually
Oh,
have this information in the podcast for the youth in the community to let them know their heritage and where they actually been and where they came from. Most children don't go out of their community. They haven't even been downtown. So just to giving them information of, look, this is where you came from. This is how you impacted history. This is how you,
mhm.
are able to use your mind for other things. So this is very nice. Beautiful.
Thank you.